Ahoy there, mateys. Today we be drawing a pirate.
And so, let's see. I'm going to start off with the big basic shapes, which is how I always like to start. So I'm going to do kind of a, almost if you can imagine like a broom sweeping the floor, kind of that shape. And I want this pirate to have kind of what I would call a dynamic pose. Dynamic pose is where they're not just standing straight and looking straight at you. You can have a really interesting looking character, but if their pose isn't, if their pose doesn't have some sort of energy, then the drawing kind of falls flat. And so that's why I'm having this kind of sweeping motion, almost a broom shape. And I'm going to give him kind of a squat, squarish head. And then I'm going to exaggerate the hat a little bit. And then for legs, I'm going to come down about there. And just kind of make a basic kind of pointy boot shape. We're going to have, let's make this area the peg leg. He's standing on a ship, and so he's got to have his legs kind of spread apart. That helps with that dynamic pose. This guy is kind of looking at us. His body isn't looking straight on at us. It's kind of going up and out in like that direction, if you can kind of see where my pencil's going. So one shoulder is higher than the other. The other shoulder is kind of tucked back, which means that this far arm that's curving out is overlapped by his coat thing here, his cloak. Okay, so right now it's just kind of like almost like a dunce hat there, kind of a curve, or a one of those bugles, the type of crunchy snack, a bugle. Okay, now for the, looks good, Leah. For the other arm, it's going to be a little bit trickier. I'm going to erase a little bit of this just so I don't confuse anybody with the shapes I'm drawing. For the other arm, we're going to do the upper arm first. So forget everything from the elbow on. We're just doing like bicep area. Lost you there for a sec. Okay. And back. Okay. I stabilize my rig. Okay. Now, for this arm, we're going to just kind of put a dot here where the elbow is going to be. Sometimes it helps to make those little guides for yourself. And then the forearm and hand, they're coming straight out at us. So we aren't going to show their full length. We're going to show them as if they're coming toward us. So like, see how this pencil, you see it's full length now, but when I turn it toward the camera, you see it like, this is called foreshortening, and it's where you see something at an angle. And that really helps sell the character as occupying 3D space, three-dimensional space. And so that forearm is coming out toward us. And of course, it's a pirate, so he's got a really big cuff. So I'm just making that an oval for now. Later I can get busy with detailing it out, but an oval works just fine to kind of show that arm coming toward us. Okay. And from here, I think we can make a pretty decent pirate. Let's start. We'll come to the face later because that's more exciting. And I love to save some of those exciting things for later. I'm going to make a hand here. And the hand, so it's his hand coming down like this. So we're going to curve that finger around, and it's going to eventually be overlapped, so that curve is fine. And then wrist here, and then thumb. So right now it's just almost like this mitten shape. And then out of this hand area is going to appear his pistol. And he's got a very piratey pistol. It has a big kind of bell end on it. If any of you guys have been to the tourist destination, the House on the Rock, or if you haven't, I'd recommend it. It's got a lot of really cool old weapon replicas that you can look at. All right, and then this arm will have kind of a big cuff to really make it piratey. Now, let's go back to this arm. Right now, this is most of this is just kind of sleeve shape. The big cuff on their sleeve is kind of hanging open, and so you're kind of peering up into the end of the pirate's sleeve. And so I'm making kind of a crescent or moon shape down there at the bottom of the sleeve, and that just shows the area that isn't his hand. And then for his hand, for now, I'm just going to make a little oval, more of a vertical oval. We're not going to get too crazy with fingers because a lot of this hand will be covered up, because this pirate here has a sword. And this is the guard on his sword. And we're going to come up and curve. Come up and curve for that sword, and then back down. Something like that for the sword. Of course, where the sword overlaps his body, we're going to erase those little lines. Also erasing my mistaken line. And pirates had all sorts of decoration. So, maybe he stole this sword off of some fancy English admiral or something. And so, maybe there's going to be some decoration on it. You can decorate the stuff as much or as little as you want. And you can do it however you want. But this is hand back here. This is the guard, and it curves around in front of the hand and just protects him while he's sword fighting. Okay. Now, let's start to add more of his costume. So he's going to have an outer coat, And then he's going to have this sort of vest thing, and then a series of belts and whatnot to kind of add complexity to the whole character. So we're going to start up by his head and come down. That just shows one edge of his outer coat. And then the other edge, the other side of his coat will be it'll just be really thin and kind of hanging open, as if the wind is kind of blowing from that direction. And let's see. So often the hand that is opposite where the hand that holds the sword is opposite of where the sword's sheath would be. So they draw it across their body, which means that I'm going to add a strap here that would kind of curve across the body over top of everything else that would hold the sword. And I'm drawing really dark right now just so you can see really well. Most of the time, if I were, just feeling my way into this drawing, I'd be drawing really lightly. But I really want you guys to see it. Okay. And we'll put maybe a little belt or a little buckle there. So this is where the end of that strap is, and the buckle a little bit higher. And those, if you look at pirate costumes, those can be really fancy too, but I'm not going to spend much time on that. And then I want to make sure that coat does come up onto his shoulder a little bit. We've got to see a little bit of that, otherwise it might confuse the viewer. And then maybe another belt coming across side to side underneath the coat. And that curves around his body. I really want to show that curve of his body to really help show that it's three-dimensional. Add a little buckle, maybe hiding slightly out of view. This is the belt that would hold the holster for his gun. And then maybe down below this, pirates really, at least pirates in stories, they really have a lot of layers to their outfits. And so in this case, I'm going to have like a piece of cloth that's tied around his waist. That's just providing another little layer of interest. So it's just draping down. There's a big knot there at the top of it. Okay. And to really make this feel refined, it's good to add stripes or spots or some sort of pattern on that cloth that's coming down. And then underneath all of that stuff, there's going to be another kind of long vest that comes down, that kind of peeks out. So underneath everything else, and then going right up toward the head. Maybe we'll see a little bit more of that kind of over here, swinging over. And always think about curving around the body. So if you draw a line straight down, anything to one side will curve that, like parentheses around the body. Everything curves a little bit to kind of help show that there's a roundness there. All right. And of course, underneath everything else is that pirate poofy shirt. Sometimes they have like little goofy kerchiefs or something made out of lace, something more delicate. And maybe that's all covered up, maybe not. It depends on the pirate. In my case, I am going to add just like this little kind of scraggly little piece of lace coming down. And maybe that'll get covered up by beard, so maybe that part's not as essential. All right. I'm going pretty fast. If you guys need to rewatch this video, I will be reposting an edited, shortened version on my YouTube channel, and I'll link to that too. So if you guys really want to do a pirate drawing, but I'm going, if I'm speeding too quickly through it. Okay. Let's keep working on the overcoat. Often they have a big, if you look at some of these fancy French and English overcoats, they often have a whole lot of embroidery or decorative edging. So I'm going to do that on both sides here. These are, honestly, these are just little squiggly lines for now. Maybe later I would want to come and add some structure to it, but this can work to just kind of help communicate that that's like a decorative edging. And then, so many pirates were people who started out in the Navy and then didn't know what to do after they got out of the Navy, and so they turned to piracy to make ends meet. And so you'll see a lot of like, old English admiral or naval costumes that you see bits and pieces of. So, you'll see like some of the fancy detailing from their old life. So I'm adding these embroidered areas that would strengthen the cloth there where they would attach a button. It's just kind of this thick decorative stitching that goes up. And then maybe the suggestion of it on the other side, just a little bit too, if you have enough of the other side peeking out. So much of the pirate is just understanding the costume and how the parts fit together. Now let's come down to this boot. Fortunately, the peg leg is really easy. We don't have to do anything special there. But this boot, it would be good to have kind of a cuff. And the cuff of the boot, this is down low, so it's kind of curving this direction around his leg. It's thinner at the top and thicker at the bottom on that cuff. And then sometimes there's going to be like a split in the middle. Almost like a little pair of shorts down there. Now that would be funny. And thinking about the shape of kind of a sock for the boot, except it has a heel on it. And then the sole of the boot. And this is the old days, so you really see the stitching, maybe there's going to be some kind of wrinkles in the leather there that kind of curve around the rounded shape. And let's work on this area of kind of the pants coming down, being all balled up where it meets up with the peg leg. That's going to be mostly in shadow, but you might see, you know, some big heavy wrinkles there pointing toward that peg leg that just kind of help show that the fabric is all bunched up. Maybe it's tied and you see a little bit sticking out. And then shade, 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 because it's down in shadow outside of the sunlight. And I'm coming up. And let's, I think what I'll do is just kind of shade these pants, trousers, whatever you want to call them. Just kind of shade them in, just to kind of set them off from the rest of it, and simultaneously put them kind of in shadow. So just kind of shading up to the waist area, up to kind of those belts. And I'll shade here too. And for the peg leg, those can come in many different shapes. Some are really rough hewn, some, you know, look a little bit more like they belong to, you know, the leg of a piano at some time. This one maybe is more the latter, a little bit more of a fancy peg leg. All right, we're really getting this costume nailed down. I'm gonna head up to the hat, and the hat is gonna have a decorative fringe too that gets thicker as it comes toward the front. And then thins down as it goes back, and you don't see any of that fringe on the underside. And then most of the hat I'm going to shade in. I'm using my trusty Blackwing Palomino pencil. They're not sponsors of these or anything. I just love them. I would recommend them to anybody who wants to make really rich drawings. And just kind of shading that all in. I like to start my shading, you know, kind of light and then build up. And with this guy, it's going to be, the shading of the hat is darkest on the bottom side of the hat where it's facing away from the light. Maybe it's like high noon and the sun is directly overhead, and so everything underneath gets shaded in. All right. Well, we haven't done the most important part yet. We haven't done the head. I've saved
the headless pirate.
the headless pirate. I've saved the most fun part for last. I'm erasing some of the details away where I'm going to put the beard. I could just draw over top, I suppose. So for the head of the pirate, I want that head to feel like it has that same sort of curve that the body does. And so this line that I'm making is just kind of the eye line. This is where the eyes would be perched on the head. And I really want to give this guy a piratey expression, a really ferocious gar type of expression. So I'm going to do one eye here. and the eye is perched right beneath a very heavy brow ridge, and he's like glaring off into the distance. Grrr. We now have a Cyclops pirate. And for the nose, eyes can be whatever shape you want them. In this case, I'm just kind of making a half circle down underneath the brow. And the brow comes down swoops down toward the middle to show that he's fierce. He's also been slaving away in the hot sun, and so, you might have some redness or darkness under his eyes. And then for his nose, I'm going to start up here by where the same level as the eyebrow, and I'm going to come down. And because he's evil, I want to give him somewhat sharp features. That just really helps translate into fierce. So he has a kind of a hawk-like nose. It's almost like it's flat on the bottom, curved here, but it comes to kind of a point. And then this part, this kind of flap over top of the nostril. That gives him a really strong, kind of scary nose. When you're making characters, every part of that character, in my opinion, should kind of help tell the story of that character. So even something like a nose, it's not just a typical nose, but it's a fierce, battle-hardened nose. And the nice thing about pirates is that if you're struggling with a certain body part, you can always have it missing. So let's say, you don't want to draw the other eye. Well, in my case, I don't, and I'm just going to give him an eye patch. Okay, so we got the nose, we got the eye patch, the other eye. This pirate is sunburned, and so I'm going to kind of just lightly shade in that nose to kind of help him look weathered. And then this is a little art trick that I figured out when I was probably in 6th grade. Mouths are really tricky to draw, but if you draw a beard, and if it's an especially shaggy beard, you don't have to draw much of the mouth. It's a very helpful trick. That's kind of the case here. I'm going to start with kind of a mustache that starts right in the corner of this nose. I'm going to come down and just kind of build that mustache in, and then coming down from almost by the eye patch. I'm going to come down again. And then I think this guy, I think I'm going to have him hollering. So maybe in this case we will see some of the mouth. Because I really want you to see some of his kind of snaggle teeth. And then I'll lightly shade in the mouth. If you don't want to add the mouth, you can just, really do a big fuzzy beard all around there. And the mouth can just kind of blend in, and that's perfectly okay. But now I'm going to build up the beard. The beard kind of comes around the mouth. It's not going to come all the way up to the eyes. The hairs will kind of point toward the eyes. They're coming out of the cheek and coming out away from the eye. Same over here. And the beard can kind of help show where the face goes. Beard can kind of direct your eye. And in the case of this grizzled old captain, you know, the beard and the hair, the beard and the hair just kind of blend together into this big fuzzy mass. There's no real separation between the two. I'm going to add some kind of little extra things as if the wind is kind of blowing. And just looking for dark areas where, you know, there would be a little more shadow, where you wouldn't quite see everything super detailed out. He's put in his time at sea, so he's a little bit older. You might have some kind of forehead wrinkles there. Really dark in that area where his hat, where the underside of the hat is, just to really help build up that shadow. And that also helps increase the contrast between the hat and his face. And that instantly creates this important focal point where his face becomes the highest contrast between dark and light. And that really helps identify that as an important part of the picture. There might be a wee bit of shading where his hat is casting a shadow down onto his head. You know, it's a big hat, so, you know, that sun comes down and casts a shadow down onto his head, and that'll happen. That's okay. But it's best, I think, if we don't completely drown out the face. We got to leave some face details to really help make that character come to life. And then, so now, you know, the rest of it would be just like a series of thinking about where the light is most prominent. Also, maybe building up some contrast in some other parts of the picture. So, you know, maybe his overcoat is kind of a middle value. Or maybe it has some sort of texture. Maybe the light is a little bit more coming from the right, and so the left in your case, and so the opposite side is a little bit more in shadow. And you can kind of just make on your own, decide how it's going to look. These heavy leather straps that cross his body, they're going to have some value to him, but they're also pretty reflective, and so you might, you know, see some highlights in them. The cuffs often have some sort of decoration on them, on pirates. All right, maybe this pirate has a big fancy feather that he stole from a French guy. Maybe he's got a little bit of a shadow down underneath him. This just gives him a sense of place. All right. So that about concludes the pirate drawing.